Hello, my name is Teemo and Teemo Tebest, and I'm a data journalist working for the European Broadcasting Union. In this video, I'm gonna show you how I am updating the data for this particular visualization that you can see on your screens. The visualizations shows which countries have started the vaccinations on any given date and which proportion of their populations have already been vaccinated. So on the darker gray color are presented the countries that have started the vaccinations on the given date, and on the lighter gray colors are presented the countries who have not. And the number of vaccinations given by its country is presented with the red circle placed on top of the country. And as we can see at the beginning of the year, on the 1st of January, some countries had started to vaccinate their population and some had not. And since then the situation has evolved quite a lot. And as we can see, for the 16th of February, by the 16th of February, maybe Great Britain, Serbia, and maybe Malta had vaccinated a little bit more of their population than rest of Europe. But as I promised, I will focus on this video on how to update this data and how I'm updating this visualization. So this data is sourced from our World in Data web service. It's administrated by University of Oxford, and they have a lot of different kinds of data sets. But of course, for this visualization, we are mostly interested in the vaccinations data and in the coronavirus data. Our World in Data web service already has a quite nice data explorer to explore their data sets, and they, for example, have this kind of graph where you can view the data and explore how the situation has evolved in a chart, and you can add countries or remove countries. Let's say we are not interested in Israel or United Arab Emirates, and then the visualization responds accordingly. Or if we are interested in some particular country which is not part of the default set of countries, we can add, for example, let's say Finland to the data set and see how Finland is doing in terms of vaccinating its population. But as the data explorer is quite nice, for the sake of our visualization, which is tailored for our needs, we need to get our hands to the raw data. Our World in Data is a very nice web service from many aspects, but also from the point of view that they allow you to download their data. And you can do it from by clicking the download button, which is found from here. When you click it, you can see that they offer the data in CSV format, which is very good because CSV stands for comma-separated values, and it's a data format that it's quite machine readable, which means that we can handle it quite easily with programming code and with scripts. CSV is basically an Excel file, but it just lacks all the formatting, so it just includes the data. And as we hover over this link, we can see that from the bottom left corner of the screen that it has this kind of URL where the data can be downloaded from and where it's downloaded from. Okay, we could do that manually, but as I have created this kind of script which does it automatically, we'll go and look at that. First, we take a pic of the CSV file that is downloadable and that it's downloaded. We could open this CSV file in Excel, but as this data is quite huge, I think it's 17 megabytes already, and it has 70,000 rows and multiple columns, it is quite a task even for Excel to handle, or for any other interface-based tool. So that's why I'm using this kind of implementation that makes use of programming code. But let's take a look at the data a little bit. Like I mentioned, this data format is CSV, which means that all the data is separated by commas. So we have on the heading line or the title line, which is the first line in this data, we define the names for all these columns, what we have here. So we have the ISO code, we have the continent, we have the location, we have the date, we have total cases, total number of new cases, we have the same information for deaths, we have the same information for ICU patients, intensive care unit patients, and we have weekly hospitalization admissions per million. But what is most interesting for us is this column here, total vaccinations per 100, which corresponds to the values that we are showing in our visualizations, because we are interested in the total vaccinations compared to the population. If we look at the data, which the actual data that starts from the row 2, we can see that the first row is from an Asian country, which is from Afghanistan, and from February 24th, 2020. And one of these numbers, then correspond to all of these columns up here, and one of these numbers is the value that interests us the most, which is the total vaccinations per 100. Of course, from this text editor, it's a little bit hard to see which one it is. If you would open this in Excel, you would have all the columns aligned more nicely, but we don't need to know at this point which value it is. We will let the code handle that for us. So we have information here for all the countries in the world, and for example here we can find maybe a European country somewhere. Okay, here is for example Belarus, and data for Belarus in August the 17th. So as we can see, we have a lot of data, and we have a lot of data that we don't need. We have data for all the countries in the world, and we are only interested in European countries, but we also have data for all the dates of the pandemic starting from the beginning, and we are only interested in more recent dates, as we know the vaccination started in mid-December last year, so we also want to maybe filter out all the dates that are not relevant to our visualization. And maybe we also want to get rid of some of the columns that are not relevant for this visualization. So we want to filter the columns, we want to filter all the countries that are not in Europe, and we want to filter all the dates that are not relevant. And how we are doing this, I am doing it with this kind of Python script. Python is a quite nice language which allows you to do all kinds of things, but especially when you accompany Python with this library called Pandas, it allows you to do a lot of very efficient tasks to datasets. And for example, to the dataset that we have here, a CSV file. So first I define here some metadata, like what this script is about, who is the author, what is the license, and how to use this. But here we have a line where we tell Python that we want to use this library called Pandas. So Pandas is basically the same thing as we would have Excel, but Pandas is an environment to run and to handle Excel files in this Python environment. So we will import Pandas library so we can use it later. We also import requests library, which allows us to make requests as we would do on a browser. So this requests library allows us to do similar tasks as we would do on a web browser. Okay, so here we import all the stuff that we need, all the right libraries that we are going to use. Okay, then we will define a variable called a URL, where we define where the data is actually being found, and it is actually in this kind of URL that we could open in our web browser, but for the sake of this script we need to define it here. Then we initialize the request with this URL, and to our request we add headers, so we kind of tell the request that we are doing this request with this kind of web browser, which is here called the user agent. This could be anything, but here we are telling that we are running a Linux distribution and we are using Firefox version 77. This could be basically anything, but sometimes websites require a user agent so you can make the request in the first place. If you don't define a user agent, sometimes websites might consider you as a bot, and then they would refuse your request. Then we are making the request by this URL open function, and to the function we give the request that we have defined on these lines. And by opening the URL, we will get the contents of the URL. So basically the CSV file to a variable called content. So now if we would print the contents of the variable content, we would basically see this kind of output. But as this CSV file is basically just a text file, in principle we need to say that it's a CSV file and we should treat it in a such manner. And for this manner we could use Excel, of course, but we are using the Pandas while we are working in this Python environment. And here we tell the Pandas library to read a CSV file from this content variable and store it to a df variable. And while we are opening the file, we already filter the data in a way that we only take columns that are called continent, location, date, and total vaccinations per 100. So we are already filtering the data while we are opening it. The continent information we will need so we can filter the data by continent, so we would only get countries that are in Europe. The location information we need so we can separate the data per country, because location in this data is actually country, or the data is country names. the date we need so we can show this kind of cumulative visualization. So we have data for each date, and the total vaccinations per 100 has the actual data of how many people have been vaccinated in the given country on a given date. Then here, this row starts to filter the data by row values. First, here we just filter the data by column values, but here we start to filter by row values. And first we filter out all values where the continent is not Europe. So we only take the rows where the continent value is Europe, and we store it in the df variable. Here we convert all the values in the data, in the remaining data, from empty to 0. Because in the original dataset, if a country has not started the vaccinations or they don't have data for that particular day, it will be empty. So we want to change those empties to zeros for future purposes and mainly for the visualization templates purposes. So in this way we will just have, instead of we would have like in Excel, we wouldn't have an empty cell, but we would have a 0 instead of empty. Then we go through all the countries one by one, and we create the data in the way that our visualization template requires it to be. And first we initialize the data variable as a dictionary. Then we add another filter to the data, so we only get the dates that are later than December 10th, 2020, because as we know, the vaccination started mid-December, so we only want to get dates that are relevant to that time frame. So I chose this date, so it's a couple of days before the vaccinations started. Then we'll go through the data one by or country by country. So we look at all the country names that are in the data, and we look all the unique country names, and we go through the countries country by country. So first we would go through, let's say, France, and then on the second loop we would have, for example, Finland and Italy and Belgium and etc. So this kind of for loop goes the data country by country. Here I have a check that if in the current loop the country name is called Vatican, I will change that to Holy See, as in my data, as in my visualization template, the Vatican is called the Holy See, so I want to change the Vatican to Holy See, so my data set and the visualization template match, or the country names match with these two instances. Then here I will skip some administrative areas in the original dataset coming from our world in data, as these administrative areas are not countries as such, but more of smaller administrative areas. So I will skip those just by my own choosing, because these are not countries, but these are more small areas, and they give a little bit of a strange look for the visualization. And these include Isle of Man, Faroe Islands, Guernsey, Jersey, and Gibraltar. So I will skip those. I won't include those into the data or into the visualization. And then here I am going through all the rows that have the location as the country that I am looking on this particular iteration. So then I will like let's say I am looking at Finland on this iteration, and then in this for loop I am going through all the rows that are equal Finland, and then I'm storing the data of Finland in this kind of data structure that I require. And this is done here. So my data structure would be, let's say it's data Finland, and let's say the date would be 2021, 1st of January, and then the value would be, let's say 3.3%. So this is kind of the structure of the data, and for the previous day it would be 12th and 31, and let's say the value would be 3.1. So I am storing the data in this kind of data structure, which then corresponds quite well to my visualization template. And then this if else is just to fill the values in a way that if there are empty values, like if if the information is missing, we will fill that information with the previous values. So instead of having a data like this, that there would be a 0 in between while the data is missing, I will change this to be the previous known data point. And then after I have gone through after the script have gone through all the countries and for each country all the dates, I will export this data in JSON format, which is used by the visualization template. So we have the visualization here, and now it runs until the 16th. And today is the 19th, so we should already have the data for the 18th. So let's see if I run this data set, or I run this script. So here I have the project folder, and I have some files and folders here, but for my script it lies in this Python folder, and the script is called 2021-COVID-19 vaccines.py, and I will run this script by running Python. I'm telling Python to run this script. So let's see what happens. It takes a little bit of time because it's 17 megabytes, but it's now done, and we can see that our visualization is refreshing, and it starts from the 11th, and if we go a little bit further all the way to the end, we can see that we still have the 16th, but we have also the data for the 18th and 17th. So this way, just by clicking and running this script here, we can run it again. It will just basically do the same and replace what it had. I am able to update this data very quickly and very efficiently, and I don't have to open my browser. I just need to go to the terminal window and run this script. And it's quite easy to modify this script to work with other data sets and also with this same data set with other columns or with other purposes. So that's basically what I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any comments or questions, I'm very happy to answer them. You can contact me via email, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day. Bye.